pretty knowledgeable about the technology and the tools at your disposal, and you know, just keep leaning on me as much as you can, as much as you will. Anything else you want me to address at this point, really?
I would just, so when we do lab practice, Joe's going to be available to give informations, and while he's here, there's been a lot of questions about protocols and indications, and you've been hearing just kind of mine and Beth's perspective on what we do clinically. What Joe can do is share with you what he hears other people doing. So not what he would recommend, but if you have a question about 50% or 10%, he's had enough conversations with therapists around the community where he'd be able to say, well, at this clinic, I know they use it for X, Y, and Z. So while he's here, if you have those types of protocol questions, and he can't answer them, he'll type. But that would be a really nice opportunity for you to kind of get more information as to what else is going on clinically in our area. If it still seems great to you, or you just want more reference points anecdotally to go to in terms of indications for duty cycles and particular types of E-stem treatments in particular. So,
I will say generally, or if not philosophically, my own approach or response to a lot of questions it seems like a contradiction in a way, but number one is to remind you of the big picture. In other words, why are you approaching the box? Why are you approaching this modality? I think there's too often people get in habits and they really lose sight of why are they walking to that machine. What are you really expecting to get out of it? So again, like anything, it's a tool. And so are you really, really clear on why you're picking it up? Are you really clear on what your objective is? That's probably, again, to state the obvious, because my kids say I'm really good at saying the obvious, that's number one. It's got to be number one. Always, always, always. Whether you're new or whether you've been in the profession for a long time, either way, it's easy to lose sight of what really is my objective. Right. Realistically, what do I expect to come out of that box, and how is this really helping the patient? Now that being said, so that's the bigger picture. The smaller picture, though, is, am I clear on, or let's put it a different way, I try to simplify the answer. Don't try to get too complex with what the machine can do. It's not magic. It may be mysterious to you and maybe to the patient. But I still say the more you do understand about the simplicity of the mechanism involved, primary and secondary mechanisms, then the simpler it is for you to explain it to your patient. Not every patient, obviously, is going to have the cognitive wherewithal to absorb what you're talking about, or the interest. They just want to feel better. Nonetheless,
let's actually say that one more time. Can you?
Not all patients have the cognitive wherewithal to grasp the primary and secondary mechanisms, let alone the interest in those mechanisms. They just want to feel better.
Right. Exactly.
That's number one. And if they don't leave feeling better, then they begin to wonder their motivation for returning. But nonetheless, so that is always number one, which is why, as we'll get into more and more, you've got different protocols, whether or not it's an acute phase, subacute phase, chronic phase. Certainly number one for just about every objective in the acute is to, calm swelling, calm the pain, get them engaged with the treatment program. And they can't do that if they're really struggling in a lot of pain.
Yes, and Joe's going to be here all day with us. So
can you stand
all your questions.
Coffee.
You'll have another set of ears to listen and give you some feedback. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, you're welcome.
Excellent. Yeah. So I'm handing out a packet here that we're going to use for lab today, and I asked Christina to take just a few minutes to go over that electrical stimulation clinical decision-making little tree in there, because I think it was a little bit intimidating for people to look at the very first chapter.
I'm going to grab a...
There is.
I'm going to
sheet that has some information on it just before you start, and then you flip to the next sheet, and I printed out some indications and contraindications.
This is ours to keep.
That is yours to keep. You're going to be using it today. And then if you keep flipping, you've got a sample TENS soap note. I figure you could use as many examples as you want, and that one was actually from the Cameron text. And then the fourth page, you've got your electrical stimulation clinical decision making 3. So if you want to flip to that fourth page.
Jill was a good lead-in. So I'm looking at this diagram here, and it's really quite similar to the problem-solving algorithm in its use of symbols. So the arrows represent the outcome of your decision, and then here's the pathway here. So what Joe talked about is you want to know what you expect to get out of the box, and that's what this is. What do you expect to get out of the box before you even walk over to the box? What do you expect it to do clinically? What is the clinical outcome? So you're thinking of where you want to finish, and then you have to start with your patient and work your way through with the patient before you select the electrical stimulation device, or any modality for that matter, that makes the most sense for what you hope to get out of that box. So I think what Beth, you want me to kind of go through the evaluation process?
Yeah, just why you would actually decide to use the electrical stimulation and how you would go through that tree.
Okay. Just to preface this, to say that when you folks are out in the clinic, you're going to have a more generic plan of care that says E-stim, attended. So some of these things that I'm going to talk about, the level of decision making that I can share with you as to what I would do personally, is not necessarily what's going to be handed to you clinically. So you can and should be able to make decisions about what type of electrical stimulation to select based upon your learning. It's within your scope of practice to do so. So I think what I'm going to do is go more towards evaluating the impairments and prioritizing those, which is what a physical therapist would do. You know, create that problem list and then look at what's primary, what's secondary, and what's tertiary to kind of give a framework of what we can expect for goals for that patient. So in the evaluation of the patient, there are certain impairments rather, and pathology where electrical stimulation is indicated. So if I have someone who, for example, has had a stroke, and they have foot drop, which means they can't lift their ankle up completely through a full range of motion to take a step. So they're catching their toe, and maybe their foot slaps down on the ground as they advance it while they walk. And they're a relatively new stroke patient, and so, but they've got some movement there. So I want to maybe see if I can't re-educate that muscle to do a more powerful recruitment of what's left and make the sensory connections between the brain and the foot so that there's more voluntary and their movement at that foot, and therefore more strengthening. So that would be a pathology where the impairment would be weakness, and the other impairment may be some loss of sensation, so I'd have to consider that, you know, with my electrical stimulation application. Because he's got a CVA, I would maybe look at other comorbid factors. Is there anything in his medical history or her medical history that would prohibit the use of electrical stimulation? You know, you look at like pacemaker considerations, so I would be looking at those contraindications just to be sure, so that, you know, when I'm educating the patient, when you put it on your foot, it goes on your foot, you know, doesn't go anywhere near, you know, these types of things. So, so is electrical stimulation indicated in that condition? Yes. If I've got someone who has that same foot drop but has no motor point activation whatsoever, no volitional movement whatsoever, I'm not likely to go to electrical stimulation right away, because there is no response down there yet, and I'm going to have to stimulate that muscle a little too hard to get what I need. So I'll be working on other things, or maybe waiting